Welcome to Empowering Workers, Federal Employees' Disability and Employment Rights and Social Security Disability for All.
Hello and welcome to Empowering Workers, Federal Employees' Disability and Employment Rights and Social Security Disability for All with Eric L. Pines. Eric is a nationally recognized federal employment lawyer, mediator, and attorney business coach. He represents federal employees and acts as in-house counsel for over 50,000 federal employees through his work as a federal employee labor union representative. I am your host, Kevin Rosenquist, and today we're giving you a step-by-step guide to applying for OPM disability retirement. Eric, welcome back.
Hi, Kevin. Pleasure to see you.
Let's start can you define OPM disability retirement?
Of course. OPM stands for the Office of Personnel Management, which is another way of saying the federal government's HR department, or I should say HR agency. It's a federal agency that deals with federal employees' pay issues, in this case, dealing with their retirement. They deal with general retirement, but they also deal with disability retirement, which is a form of retirement, but basically an earlier retirement. So that's the Office of Personnel Management. And so if a person is working for the federal government and they can no longer do the useful and efficient service or the essential functions of their job, they have, as long as they've worked at least a year and a half for the federal government as a regular employee, they're generally entitled to apply for disability retirement. It is a special program that I can go into a little more in a second, but it's a wonderful program which has incredible benefits that federal employees can seek if they're in that unfortunate situation where they can no longer work.
And then another term before we continue on, SSDI claims. Can you talk about what that is?
Of course, that stands for Social Security Disability Insurance, and it segs nicely into our discussion because we're talking about a point-by-point application process for OPM disability. And so let me clarify the difference between the two, and I think that will help you. If you are a federal employee, you have two rights to disability, interestingly. Now, I should clarify, in the old days, you didn't. There was an older retirement system called CSRS, Civil Service Retirement Service, otherwise known as CSRS. Those people did not pay into Social Security, so they were not entitled to apply for Social Security disability insurance. But they were able to apply for federal disability retirement, which is another way of saying OPM disability. Now, today, the typical employee for the last maybe 30, 40 years has been a FERS employee, which stands for the Federal Employee Retirement System. Those people can apply for both types of disability. Actually, I should say they must apply. If they're going to apply for disability, for OPM disability, which is another way again of saying federal disability retirement for federal employees, they must apply for Social Security because they pay into the Social Security system. So again, let's separate the two out. They're both, in many ways, they're required, but they're very different. And our firm represents people, federal employees with disability retirement for federal employees, but we also represent non-federal employees for Social Security disability if they're applying or if they've been denied and they're appealing. So we do both. But when we're representing federal employees, part of the process, one of the first things you should do if you're applying for disability retirement is to apply for Social Security disability. Now, you do not need to get Social Security disability, but you do need to apply, and OPM wants to make sure you do before they're willing to grant disability. They don't care if you get it, though if you do get it, it does help you because it shows you are very disabled, which I'll talk about in a second. They don't, but they care that you apply, and that's the key. So we'll help you apply. We'll represent you in both your disability retirement and your Social Security disability. But now let's talk about the differences between the two because they're huge. The best way to say it like this is Social Security disability, you pretty much have to be in a hospital bed or you in your own bed, but you just can't work at all. You can't make more than, I think it's around $1,400, $1,500 a month. OPM disability for federal employees is not that way. It's much easier to get. It has to be that you can't work in your job that you were hired for, in your position description. So it's much easier to get. It's not any occupation, it's your own occupation. It happens to be that it's much easier to get federal employee disability retirement, and you can get federal employee disability retirement and even get another job and work part-time and make up to 80% of your salary and make more money than you made before. It's actually quite a spectacular benefit. So we can go into that later, but I just wanted to let you know, Social Security is a stricter requirement, and it's something that every American who pays their it pays into their Social Security taxes can apply for. Federal employee disability or OPM disability retirement is something only a federal civilian with a year and a half of federal service can apply for.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. Yeah. So what medical documentation do you need for OPM disability and SSDI claims?
In general, you need medical documentation that shows you're not able to do either the essential functions of your job for OPM disability or pretty much any job for Social Security disability. You have to be able to justify, so it doesn't look like you're making it up, with a medical professional writing that you cannot do your job. It's interesting in our firm that we find that to be so important. I think we're the only firm who does this. We actually draft a doctor's letter for your doctor. Of course, we ask you to ask your doctor first. So we're doing it ethically. We give it to them in a Word format so they see what OPM is looking for. It's a very extensive document, and it makes sure that we touch on all the different requirements, and then we hand it to your doctor so they can make it theirs, turn it, make any changes they want, but they get the gist of what OPM is looking for. So to answer your question, for OPM, medical documentation is helpful, but to have a specific, other than just records, but to have a specific letter that goes through your position description and says why you cannot do that job is something that we do at our firm, and we think it's essential for getting disability the first time and not having to do appeals. And it's one of the benefits of working with us. Social Security, a little bit different, because Social Security, you're just applying in the beginning it's much harder to get, and you need solid evidence that you're medically unable to work at all. And then on appeal, there's an actual in-person appeal, and you obviously want to put records together. A letter like that as well can help, and so forth.
Can you explain how the OPM and Social Security disability claims processes impact each other? Like, for example, if an employee is approved for SSDI, how does that affect our OPM disability claim?
Yeah, we started to touch on that a little bit before. SSDI is so hard to get that I think if you have SSDI, to call it to the attention of the OPM clerk who's looking at your application, it's going to make your application much more powerful, because it's very, very unlikely that a person would get Social Security disability and not get OPM disability as well, because it's so much harder to get Social Security.
Okay. And how do the benefits and rules around working while receiving OPM disability and SSDI benefits differ?
This is an interesting question. It's different for federal employees versus non-federal employees. Let's talk about federal employees, because that's what one of our specialties. For federal employees, basically, if you get disability retirement, the government looks at your high three, your salaries. They take an average, meaning the highest amount you made for the last 3 years or over your career if you took a demotion. Then they pay you 60% of that for the first year. And then for every year thereafter until you reach age 62, they pay you 40% of your salary. And so that's how much you get for OPM disability. Social Security, on the other hand, if you're a federal employee and you already have OPM disability, the first year you get nothing. And it's very interesting because it can be dangerous, because sometimes Social Security sends you the money, you start spending the money, and they're not aware that you got money from OPM for your disability retirement. And we have clients come to us, they're stuck with what's called an overpayment case. And OPM says, you owe us the money back, pay us back. And those are very hard cases, and it's not a pleasant place to be. So it's really important to know this, that you cannot get both your first year. Now, second year, when you're down to 40%, all the way till you're 62, however old you are, then you can pick up around 20% difference. So a person who's on Social Security and OPM disability will start reaping that benefits from the second year onward.
Okay. How are mental health conditions evaluated in OPM disability and SSDI claims?
Well, let's put it this way. Those cases are harder.
We've talked about that a little bit before.
Right. Because if you're missing a limb and your job requires you to run upstairs, it's very hard to argue with that person.
Yeah. If,
God forbid, you have cancer and you're very, very ill, many times OPM will expedite your application because they know that you're very sick. But an emotional mental disability, on the other hand, is not visible. It's not open to the world. And there's no actual scientific test to say what your condition is per se. There are different tests for different conditions, but it's not clear, as we know. It can be vague. So in those cases, I find that most of our cases, and we've probably done over 1,300 OPM disability applications and tons of Social Security applications. But through the years, I would say the majority of them are, at least for OPM disability, are mental, emotional disability cases, because people need help. People need to make sure they have a solid doctor's letter, that they have solid, whatever testing is available, that it's been obtained and put together in a nice, neat package. We usually do a cover letter that explains the person's situation. And then under that we talked a little bit about, this is a step-by-step guide for OPM. Well, I'll just quickly tell you what the process is. Basically, there's a 3112 form where you fill out your information. You get information from your supervisors about how you performed. There's information about disability accommodation. Did you request accommodation in the 3112D form? And then there's that doctor's letter we're talking about. That goes together with a 3107 form where you're applying for disability. So our firm helps with all these different things, or your agency can help you with these things if you're employed. It's all put together in a package with a good doctor's letter and your medical records, and it's sent we do it with a cover letter that tells the story. So it's easier for the OPM clerk who's reading 100 of them a day to get through it and know what's really going on. So to answer your question, I don't know if I answered your question. What was your question?
Well, mental health conditions, how they're evaluated.
Right. Thank you. Okay. So to answer your question, mental health conditions, clearly to put it together in a professional way, to have a medical professional with an extensive letter showing that your condition wasn't just made up today, but has a history. And a lot of times just as a tip, we don't like to say my work environment stressed me out. I know people generally do feel that's the case, but we feel like OPM is looking for a landslide of those cases because everyone's going to think their work environment is stressful. So we like to really focus on the condition existing outside of work. So there's
interesting.
Anyway, so there's a few tips to help with these mental emotional conditions that it helps with working with somebody who's done it before.
Why do you find that it's better to look at conditions outside of work? Is it just like you said, because they're just inundated with, oh, my job's stressing me out, so you want to show that there's more to it than that for you?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think it relates a little bit to in the EEO arena, equal employment opportunity and discrimination cases. It happens to be, I noticed that people a lot of times will claim that they're suffering from a hostile work environment from their supervisor, causing them a ton of stress. And in general, these are hard cases to win because everybody finds their work environment stressful and everybody's going to blame their supervisor. And if the government opened the floodgates to those type of cases or regularly finding for the employee in those situations, then basically they're running the risk that you're looking at, like, for example, in those EEO cases, my remedy is to give me a new supervisor. Well, anybody who doesn't like their supervisor is going to say, I don't like my supervisor. They stress me out. My remedy is to move away. So that's not a possible remedy EEO. Just like here by OPM disability, I think that the government is always looking to see if someone's trying to pull a fast one. And they're always looking to see if people are trying to take advantage of the situation. And so I think this is a good example of an area where people can take advantage of this issue, and even if they don't mean to.
Yeah.
But we can't be paying benefits to everybody who's stressed at work. Nobody wants that as a taxpayer.
Right. No, for sure. I don't like my supervisor either.
I know we were going to talk about that, Kevin. Call me after the. Well, we weren't going to talk about that one.
And a lot of this, this is very complicated stuff. I mean, I know you know it like the back of your hand, but for the rest of us, it's definitely a different world and it's a lot to navigate. How do you help clients? Where what point do you see them going? Or what point do you say to people, hey, you really should have legal representation? I mean, I almost feel like it's like from the beginning, because the process is so complicated. I mean, is there a lot someone can do on their own before they call someone like you, or is it really best to get, help right away?
I'm just going to speak for myself. I would always try to figure things out myself because that's my personality. So there's nothing wrong with doing the research. I mean, when I see clients, some of them are really savvy at research. Some of them, I want to hire them to work with me. And so that's your personality. Everyone has a different Myers-Briggs personality type. If you're that type of person who likes legal things, then sure, go ahead, do the research. Said you can do a lot of this on your own. It's all out there on the web, especially today with ChatGPT and all these different, do what you can do. But let's be honest, with the risk of being biased, it is helpful in life to work with somebody who does this day in, day out. Even if you could look it up yourself, there are many nuances of it that just come from doing it over and over again. That's why we go to experienced doctors. That's why we go to, experienced engineers to build things. There's definitely in life, there's always nuances and there's tax and there's things that are written that in practicality are not the reality. So it's helpful to speak with someone. That's why we do these case reviews where we charge a little bit more than your typical case review, but we are able to really impart our knowledge to you and you can take it and do it on your own. And we'll teach you what you need to do. And if we don't think you should hire us, we'll be crystal clear about that. And if we think you should hire us, we'll tell you because we think we can get you attorney's fees back in the end. Like we really go out of our way to only be a positive and a benefit to our employees. Our clients, our employees too. The point is that we are here to help other people. We thrive on having positive relationships with our clients and getting good reviews and and treating people the way we want to be treated. So to answer your question, it definitely is something that depends on your personality. If you're like a closet lawyer, go for it. So you do what you can do. And if you get stuck, call an attorney. If you're suffering from a disability and you just don't have the energy to do it, then it's great to have an attorney who does this every day. If you are not suffering from disability, but you're not legalistic, it's not your personality, you're a big picture person, then again, it's helpful to have an attorney who does it and knows the ins and outs of the situation and can give you an honest assessment.
Yeah, it definitely seems that way. All right. Well, thanks for joining us on Empowering Workers, Federal Employees' Disability and Employment Rights and Social Security Disability for All with Eric L. Pines. To connect with Eric and his team, visit pinesfederal.com. And of course, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel and leave us a review. Eric, always great seeing you. Thanks so much for being here.
My pleasure. Take care, Kevin.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.